Chapter 3, Fashion Forward. I've always been very goal-oriented. At 10 years old, I didn't necessarily know what I wanted to be when I grew up, but I knew that I needed to get straight A's. I loved math and analyzing numbers. By the age of 15, I knew I wanted to combine business with fashion. Initially, I considered getting my bachelor's degree in business, but after I spent the summer in New York City as an assistant buyer, I knew fashion was the only road for me. The Fashion Institute of Technology had just opened its first 4-year program. It was a very exclusive honors program. 3 months later, 3 months before the start of its inaugural semester, I went to see the dean and convinced him to admit me. Sometimes in life and in business, you have to just go for it. I have always taken professional risks, always thought 3 steps ahead when it comes to my career. Even before I got into FIT, I had a plan for my future. 1 step ahead, I wanted to study business and fashion. 2 steps ahead, I wanted to get into a buying training program. 3 steps ahead, I wanted to become a buyer for a top department store. So I called the person who hired part-time executive help for Macy's. Because I had the courage to go for it, I got a job as a part-time sales manager, which paved the way for me to get into a top buying program and ultimately to become a buyer for Macy's. I started out as a sales girl on the floor and worked my way up to acting sales manager. I wound up taking 21 credits and working a 34-hour week. But it was worth it because I was on my way to realizing my dream of working in fashion. In my 20s, I was full of energy and ambition, and I was determined to make my mark in fashion as a businesswoman. In the 80s, I worked for Calvin Klein when Brooke Shields was doing the now legendary advertising campaign for the newly launched CK Calvin Klein jeans label. And from there, I went to French Connection. I wanted to get out of the junior market and into Missy, which was adult sizes. So I started working for Flora Kung, a fashion designer who was known for her vibrant silk dresses and freehand prints. I was managing a new division for her and traveling all over the country, opening accounts with upscale department stores like Neiman Marcus, Bergdorf's, and Marshall Fields. From there, I went to work for a company called Sing Designs that did private production for stores like The Limited, Express, Ann Taylor, and Talbot's. The founder, Irving Benson, was married to a woman by the name of Diane B., who had a beautiful high-end collection. She had her own boutiques, but she also sold to specialty stores and department stores, and I was brought on as a sales manager for her line. Right away, I was booking as much as the two girls that were already working there, so I was bringing in 50% of the business. I was good at sales because I loved working in fashion and I was very aggressive. Eventually, Mast Holdings, a subsidiary of the Limited, came in and acquired 80% of Sing Designs. I was told they would keep me on to run the fashion line. But just before the company went public, Mast decided to shut down. Diane B., my boss, came to me and said, "We want to keep you on. We're just waiting to get some refinancing for the Diane B line. In the meantime, we have excess inventory that we need to get rid of. Do you think you can help us out?" Now, this was something I had not done before. I had been selling high-end fashions to department stores, and they were asking me to liquidate millions of units of overstock quickly. But I approached the challenge like any other in my life. I embraced it with a positive attitude. In the end, I exceeded everyone's expectations, even my own. I sold millions of dollars worth of inventory in just a couple of weeks. My bosses were shocked, but for me, it was simple. I understood that everything in business is about playing the game and getting the order. If I had a pant or a top that I knew I only needed to sell for $8 a unit, I would ask for 10. Rule 1, always start high. If they offered me $7, I would say, "Okay, I can take your order for $7. I'll hold it on the side, but I can't promise you'll get shipped. If I get a better offer, I'll have to take it. But if we write the order up now for $8, I will guarantee you that you will get it shipped." It almost always worked, and I would end up writing the order for $8. Rule 2, know what you're selling and stick to your guns. After 6 months, Sin couldn't find financing for the Diane B line, so the firm closed it down and I was laid off. Meanwhile, I had been dating a doctor for a few years. We were engaged to be married, but he had commitment issues and I could never get him to set a date. I had tried to break up with him several times, but he always found a way to reel me back in. Then one day I realized that what I always knew, I would never end up marrying him. Subconsciously, I had intentionally picked the wrong guy. Yes, on paper, he looked good. He was a doctor, he was successful, he was funny, handsome, and smart, but he was emotionally distant, like my father. Finally, I realized that I was better off without him. I remember one day I decided I'd had enough and I just packed up all my things. I hadn't officially moved in with him, but I hardly ever stayed at my own place anymore. I had kept my own apartment because somehow I must have not I must have known not to give it up. I couldn't stand my roommate at the time, but now I was relieved I hadn't moved out. I hired some guys from the food emporium down the block to help me with my boxes, borrowed my ex's Jaguar from his garage, loaded it up with my stuff, and drove it to my old apartment. When we got home that night, there was no trace that I was ever there, not even a Tampax or a jar of nail polish. Nothing. They say the three things in life you need the most are love, home, and career. I was back in with a roommate I couldn't stand. Strike one. I had just left the man I thought I was going to marry. Strike two. And I had been laid off from my job. Strike three. Suddenly, everything I had been working for seemed to be falling apart. But I made a very conscious decision that I would not stop believing in myself. I have always been very frugal, and I have always saved my money, and I never ever spend over my means. But I decided to do something very frivolous. I took the 5,000 severance I got from Sin and bought myself the most magnificent golden isle fox fur coat that I had ever seen. It complemented my long blonde hair perfectly, and I felt so fabulous and glamorous in it. I had worked hard my entire life, supported myself through college, and watched every penny I made, but I made a very deliberate decision to use that money to take care of me, to make an investment in myself. So there I was, pushing 30, no fiance, and no job. Even my living situation was unstable, but I had a fabulous fur coat. I knew that I had to take back control of my life. I began looking for a new apartment. I resolved to start dating again and started working to get my career back on track. As fate would have it, on the day I moved back into my apartment, the phone rang and it was Mario. We had gone out on one date a few years back, but we kept getting our wires crossed and never hooked up for a second date. I often saw him around the gym and we flirted shamelessly, but we were both involved with other people, so it never went anywhere. Then, out of the blue, he called me up and said, I want you to know I just ended it with the girl I was dating, and I was curious if you're still in a relationship. I said, well, funny you should ask. You're going to be the first to know that I just ended my engagement. Great, he said. Let's have dinner. Didn't you hear what I said? I just broke off the engagement with the man I was planning on marrying. I don't want to go out on a date. But Mario was persistent and charming, and I ended up agreeing to go out with him. I didn't want it to feel too much like a date, so I arranged to meet him at the restaurant. I remember walking in and spotting him sitting at the table. He stood up, and when our eyes met, it was like thunderbolts. We had an instant, intense connection. It was unlike anything I had ever experienced before. We started dating, but after 10 months, I realized something was holding me back. I was terrified of marriage, and I knew Mario wanted a wife and family. I didn't want to hurt him, so we broke up. It was painful. I remember both of us crying and him saying, I love you, and I know you love me. I did love him very much, but I knew I wasn't being fair to him. I knew he wanted to marry me, but I just couldn't turn the corner. I wasn't ready. I was afraid to commit to marriage because it almost felt claustrophobic to me. I was afraid of getting close to someone because my mother had such a bad relationship with my father. Before Mario, I had chosen to be with men who were charming and good looking, but who were emotionally distant and cold. Like my father, I wanted to have to win their attention and affection, but it was safe because I knew I never would. I was afraid to really care about someone and be vulnerable. I realized I needed to work on myself before I could be in a healthy relationship. I started seeing a therapist 3 times a week, and eventually she helped me to see that marriage is a partnership, not a prison. Once I learned that, I was able to take a leap of faith. After 6 months, Mario and I got back together, and within a few months, we were engaged. Meanwhile, the accountant from Sin Designs had called me up and said, Ramona, we still have excess inventory, and I don't have time to get rid of it. Why don't you buy it from us and resell it yourself? They only wanted 100,000 for it, and I knew I could sell it and easily make a 20% profit for myself. The only problem was coming up with the initial money to buy the stock. So I picked up the phone and started hustling. I got $25,000 in prepaid orders, but I still had another $75,000 I needed to come up with. I knew this well to do businessman who had been a mentor to me, and he offered to put up the remaining cash, but I would have to make him a partner and give him a percentage of the business. I decided to call up my father and ask for his advice. When I heard his voice on the other end of the phone, I could already hear the judgment in his voice, but I took a deep breath and dove right in. Hi, Dad. I need to ask your advice. I've been selling closeouts for Sin, but now I have a chance to do it on my own. It's an amazing business opportunity. There's no risk because I only take the order if I have the merchandise pre sold and all the accounts I sell to have AA credit earnings, triple A credit earnings. I need to prepay for the merchandise, and there's a businessman who wants to partner with me. He offered to put up the cash, and I need it, and my father cut me off, and I will never forget what he said next. Ramona, in business, you need no partners. How much do you need? 75,000. Without hesitation, he said, "Okay, I'll write the check and send it to you today." I almost peed my pants. This was a man who probably saved 80 cents of every dollar he ever made. He was a penny pincher. Every week, without fail, he gave my mother a hard time, no matter how much or how little she spent on groceries. To my father, 75,000 was the equivalent of $1 million, but he didn't miss a beat when I told him how much I needed. My father, Mr. Miser, who didn't like women, who didn't believe I would ever amount to anything, was cutting me a check for 75 grand. I couldn't believe it. I paid him back in 30 days plus interest. I was a little pissed off that he made me pay the interest, but I was still grateful that he lent me the money. After that, my mother would tell me how he would brag about his daughter to all his friends. He didn't quite tell me to my face, but for the first time in my life, I knew he was proud of me. It was a big moment in our relationship, as bad as he was all those years when I was growing up. For him to step up and help me like that was the last thing I ever expected from him. After that, our relationship didn't exactly improve, but I actually willingly went home for Christmas, and that was huge for me. I hadn't been home for Christmas in at least 10 years. That's how I became a jobber and started my first business, RMS Fashions Inc. I bought and sold excess inventory, and I ended up making a lot of money doing it. When I started out, I had no idea I would be in the business for the next 20 years. At first, I was just working out of a large handbag, but I quickly decided to get my own office and commit to a 1 year lease for 12 grand. I figured if I don't make a penny this year, what's the worst that can happen? I'll be out 12 grand. Okay, I'll take that risk. I went out in the market not knowing who to buy from, but I'd look up manufacturers' names and cold call. I'd walk into a showroom, find out who was in charge of selling excess inventory, and introduce myself. Then I'd follow up and call them again. I was aggressive and ambitious. If I heard Express had canceled 50,000 units of a top, I would buy the lot from them and send it to my own warehouse. To eliminate risk, I'd always have pre orders in place with stores like TJ Maxx, Marshalls, Ross Stores, and Burlington Coat Factory. I was always scanning for opportunities. If I read an article in Women's Wear about some designer closing its dress division, I'd call the company and ask about its inventory. I'd usually walk out with a purchase order for 50,000 dresses that I, of course, had already pre sold to my buyers. But customers loved me and they knew that I always shipped a quality product. But tracking down inventory wasn't always easy. My biggest challenge was that I was always having to reinvent myself because I couldn't buy the same product from the same manufacturer all the time. They were selling to me at a loss if they sold to me at all, the time they'd go by the time they'd go out of business. So I was constantly on the hunt, like a squirrel looking for a nut. I was successful right out of the gate because I knew how to control my cash flow, and that's what can make or break a business. My first order was from a customer who I had known for a couple years, so I was able to ask the company to prepay me. I actually remember getting that first check for 50,000. I just kept thinking, "Holy shit, 50 grand made out to me." After that, I would make sure the stores paid me in 10 days. Most stores would pay you net 60 days, but my customers wanted my product and I was persistent enough that I demanded 10 days and got it. I would get 30-day terms from the manufacturers, and with 10-day terms, For my buyer, I always had a float of 20 days of money. They're t- that These are typically unheard of terms in any business. I actually had the opposite problem from most businesses. I had excess cash in my account at all times. This was such an exciting period of my life because I was working fewer hours, making more money, and best of all, I was making it for myself. I worked hard and saved my money. As a result, I had seven figures in the bank before I was even married. Funnily enough, I had my most financially successful year when I was pregnant with Avery. That year, I made three deals in a row for $250,000 each profit. Usually, my deals were $10,000 profit or $20,000 profit. I believe God was looking out for me. I was in my late 30s, running my own business, and about to have a baby. I had no idea if I was going to be able to keep up working the way I had been. With those three deals, I had enough money that no matter what happened with the pregnancy or the new baby, I could take off a year of work if necessary. God was truly looking out for me that year. Not only was my business stronger than ever, four months old, when Avery was 4 months old, we found our beautiful house in the Hamptons. I had been looking at real estate out there even before Mario and I were engaged. I have always believed in real estate. Everyone else I knew was investing in the stock market, but I came from a middle class family. I worked hard for my money and I just didn't trust the market. I knew I wanted to buy a home with my savings, and I was confident that I had a good eye for real estate. The moment I saw the house, which at the time was selling 800 for $875,000, I fell in love and used my premarital savings to buy it. I put my heart and soul into that house. We closed in November, and over the next 6 months, I invested $500,000 and completely redecorated all 7,000 square feet of the house, complete with curtains, furnishings, and landscaping. We celebrated Avery's first birthday there the following May. This would be the first of many happy family memories in that house. I realized when my mother was on her deathbed that we both projected our sense of stability onto our homes. I must have picked that up from her without even understanding that she had felt that way until just before she died. In many ways, for me, the house in Southampton was also a fuck you to my father. I will never forget when I was in college how he'd complain, "Why should I pay for your last 2 years? You're just going to get married and have kids." He didn't believe in me, not until I was well into my 20s and already had a successful career. Although it meant a lot to me that he supported me when I started my own business, it wasn't until I bought that house that I felt that I had truly proved myself. It's not only my home, it's a badge of success. Even though I bought it after Mario and I were married, he would always refer to it as your house or her house. That became such a deep part of me. I needed it for my own identity. It was the home I never had. It represented love and became a part of my soul. However, without my realizing it, this need for independence was slowly eroding my marriage. In the beginning, Mario wasn't threatened by my success. He was proud to have such an ambitious, strong woman by his side. It was those qualities that drew him to me in the first place. But as his own business began to struggle, my success and need for independence began slowly but steadily pushing us apart. Enter the Real Housewives of New York City. It is the middle of the summer 2007. The days are long and hot, and business is very slow. I am working with one of my manufacturers when my cell phone rings. It's my friend, Dr. Sharon Giese, a prominent plastic surgeon and expert on natural anti aging procedures. She says I was approached by a producer from Bravo. They're doing some kind of a reality television show about women in New York City who are married, live an upscale lifestyle, and are very social. Right away, I thought of you. Would you be interested? I'm bored. It's the end of July, the deadest time of year in my line of work. So I say, what the heck? I'll do it just for the hell of it. Give them my number. A few weeks later, a small camera crew comes out for the day. They film me at my office, going to appointments at home and with Avery, who is 12 years old. She is very excited about this opportunity. She has been interested in acting, but we never pursued it for her because it's such a demanding business and school has always come first. Avery and I decided to go shopping at Lester's, one of our favorite stores. The cameras follow us around the store, but I hardly notice. I just go about my day as usual. I'm sorting through a rack of clothing when Avery tugs on my arm and whispers, "Mommy, everyone's looking at us. They're staring at us." I roll my eyes and say, "Oh, Ave, just pretend the cameras aren't there." It's easy for me to block out the cameras, probably because growing up, I had to block out all the noise in my family. I shut the cameras out. I shut out my father's yelling. We spend the entire day filming and it's exhausting, but fun. At one point, Avery says to me, "Oh my God, this is so much work, Mommy." I had been filming all day long and she had only filmed for 2 hours with me. I say to her, "Avery, if you want to be an actor, this is what it's about. We're just doing a demo tape for a reality show here. It would be 10 times more work if you were filming a movie." When we get back to our apartment, Avery is excited. She keeps asking, "Are we going to be on, Mommy? Do you think we'll be on the show? Is this it? Is this it?" But the producer explains that the 6 hours of footage have to be edited down to a 2-minute video that she will submit to the head producers of the show. They are the ones who will make the final decision, she tells us. "I'll get back to you." The funny thing is, when she does get back to me, it turns out the head producer has already seen me on another woman's demo tape. I had almost forgotten, but a few months back I had attended a cooking party hosted by my friend Pamela Morgan, who owns a culinary business called Flirting with Flavors. During the party, I was my usual animated, outgoing, gregarious self, bopping around and asking questions, when the head producer watched the tape and saw me and said, "Who is that woman? Let's find her." Apparently, they tried to track me down, but they couldn't find me, even through Jill Zarin, who was also at the party. Could have told them how to contact me. 10 months later, they get my audition tape and realize I'm the person they've been looking for. A few weekends later, I'm at my house in the Hamptons when I get a call from the producer telling me they want to sign me on the show and they have a contract for me to sign. "That's great, but before I sign anything, I'd like to see the demo tape," she says. "Sorry, but we can't do that." I don't say no, but I don't back down. "Really? I don't think I consider doing the show without seeing the demo tape. I don't think I can sign the contract." She puts me on hold, and in a few minutes, she comes back and says, "Okay, what's your address?" Score one for Ramona. They FedEx the demo tape to me in the Hamptons, and it's totally adorable. It opens with Avery, who says, "I'm Avery, and this is my mom, Ramona. I'm happy with how they capture my energy and portray my family, so I decided to do the show." A few days later, I'm playing tennis with Jill Zarin at my house. She says, "I'm going to be doing a reality show for a cable channel." I go, "Really? I got offered a show too." It's not until the following week, when we meet to play tennis again, that we even realize we've been chosen for the same show. When I tell her I got them to send me the demo tape, she's like, "What? I didn't think of that." After they send me the contract, I start having second thoughts. I don't really have time for this. I don't need to be famous. I'm already popular with my friends. I already have a successful business. I'm married. I have my daughter. I have a full life. I don't need this stress in my life. What do I need to take this on for? I contact Bravo and tell them I'm out. A few days later, Mario is off playing tennis with Avery, so I decide to get together with a girlfriend. Polo is huge in the Hamptons during the summer. It's kind of like field hockey played on horseback. I'm not a huge fan of the game, but I do like to network and people watch. I make some calls, and a friend of mine gets us into the VIP tent where we run into one of the Bravo producers. She says, "Ramona, I don't understand why you're not doing the show." I'm a little taken aback that they still want me, but I reply, "I can't do the show because I just don't have time." Immediately, she starts giving me the hard sell. "It's just an hour or two, once or twice a week. We'll work around your schedule." Assuming they are looking for an uber socialite New York housewife, I argue, "I don't really do all those big charity events anymore. I'm older than Jill. I've done those huge benefits for 200, 300 people. That's not where I'm at anymore." "That's okay. We don't need that from you. I prefer to do dinner parties for 15, 30 people tops," I explain. "Okay, great. We can film that," she insists. "No, you don't get it. My friends don't want to be filmed." And then, feeling self-conscious, I added, "I'll be boring." She looks at me and says, "Ramona, since when are you ever boring?" Then something clicks in my head. I've been encouraging Mario to build a website to drive business to his company. I've always believed that if that business is like a shark, you have to keep moving. If you stop, you die. He's been reluctant because he's always used sales reps, but recently he agreed to give it a shot. We decide that the website should have a different name from the family business, so we call it True Faith Jewelry, in honor of the inspiring advice my mother gave me when I was a young girl. I decide to do the show as a way to showcase Mario's True Faith Jewelry website. That night, Mario and I sit down with Avery at the dinner table and tell her, "Avery, we have an opportunity to do this reality show. We'll be in the public eye, but we're not doing it to be famous or popular. We're doing it to help your dad's company develop a new business. We're doing it to bring more exposure to the website. So we did the show. The first season was only supposed to be 6 episodes, but it ended up being 9 with the reunion and lost footage episodes. From the beginning, I had a gut feeling that we would average 1 million viewers. They all thought I was nuts, but I turned out to be right. I knew the show would be a huge success. Years later, Avery told me that when people would talk about to her about the show, especially when they were criticizing something I did that they didn't agree with her, that I did that they didn't agree with, her response was always, "My mom does the show for business. It was a business move for her and my father to develop True Faith jewelry. And now she has other businesses that she developed because of it." That's really why I did the show, to help my husband. And then I quickly realized that it was an amazing opportunity for me, too. I was getting burned out doing the closeouts, and it was time for me to try something new. The first opportunity that came my way was a chance to promote the skincare line I had been developing for some time. I partnered with a top chemist, and it works really well. It's made my skin look 15 years younger. I didn't put it out in stores or do that much marketing. I mostly did it to show Avery how to make a business from beginning to end. Then I did an HSN jewelry line, which is a dream come true for me. Ultimately, I was even able to develop my own wines, Ramona Pinot Grigio and Ramona Merlot. One of the biggest benefits of doing Housewives has been that it allowed me to show my daughter that you can find business opportunities anywhere and at any age. Here I was in my 50s, all these doors were opening for me.